When Phil Robertson took his final breath, his family braced for the heartbreak they expected, yet nothing could have truly prepared them for what followed. Phil, a man whose life was devoted to preaching faith, simplicity, and discipline, left behind something far more intricate than anyone could have imagined. When the family's lawyer finally opened the envelope containing his final instructions, the room fell into stunned silence. They had anticipated grief, yet they were unprepared for the profound and deeply personal legacy Phil had left behind, carefully recorded in his own hand. These were the last days of a man renowned for his toughness, whose presence had long commanded respect and unwavering attention. In the months leading up to May 2025, Phil's health began to deteriorate in ways that emotionally shook his children. The man they had always known as indomitable, the hunter who braved storms, the preacher of unwavering conviction, the figure who lived by a rigid personal code, was starting to slip away. When the family publicly disclosed in December 2020 that Phil had been diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's disease, fans presumed it meant a slow, gradual decline. Inside the Robertson home, the truth was far more painful and immediate. The disease advanced swiftly, eroding not only his memory, but his physical strength, leaving the family struggling to confront the reality that the unshakable patriarch they loved was vulnerable. At first, the changes were subtle. Misplaced objects, repeated questions, long pauses in conversation, and moments when he seemed lost in thought. These minor lapses, however, soon grew into full episodes of disorientation. Phil would forget what day it was or start a story only to lose the thread midway. These small but terrifying reminders made it clear that the man who had built a business empire with his own hands and withstood decades of controversy was now fighting a battle he could not win. By April 2025, the family could no longer shield the truth from the public. On an episode of the Unashamed podcast, Jay spoke with a mixture of honesty and heartbreak. "He's not good. We're making him comfortable," he admitted. Those simple words revealed to the world the private struggle the family had been enduring in silence. Phil Robertson, the patriarch, the voice of faith, the steadfast leader, was fading. His body weakened, and even simple daily tasks required assistance. His once commanding, steady voice softened to the point where speaking for even short periods left him exhausted. Alzheimer's was affecting not only his mind, but every facet of his being. Despite the deterioration, Phil maintained remarkable composure. Death had never frightened him. He had spoken of it for years with certainty and acceptance. To Phil, death was a transition, not an end. "Don't cry when I die," he often told his children. "Dance, sing, but don't cry." He repeated this guidance, so often it became almost a family motto, a code of behavior he hoped they would uphold when the time came. But when his final day arrived, none of them were able to fully follow his instruction. In the early hours of May 25, 2025, Phil passed away at home, surrounded by those who loved him most. He was 79 years old. The moment was quiet, but the weight of it was immense. His son Jace was the first to announce the news publicly, saying, "My dad has gone to be with the Lord today." Willie and Corey followed, sharing messages filled with both sorrow and gratitude, honoring their loss while celebrating the years they had shared with him. The funeral that followed reflected exactly what Phil would have wanted. There were no reporters, no cameras, no politicians eager to claim the moment. There were only family, close friends, and the quiet that comes from decades of shared life. They prayed, remembered, and tried to honor his request not to cry, though most could not. The grief was too heavy, the love too strong. Yet the deepest emotional reckoning did not occur at the funeral. It came the following day in a lawyer's office, when the family gathered to hear Phil's final words, his will, and the handwritten letters he had prepared long before Alzheimer's began to steal his mind. It was in that moment, reading his words, that the tears truly flowed. Phil's final days had not been solely about dying. They had been about preparing his family for life without him. The reading of Phil Robertson's will took place behind closed doors in a West Monroe lawyer's office the day after the funeral. Present were Miss Kay, his wife of more than 50 years, their sons Alan, Jace, Willie, and Jay and Phyllis, the daughter Phil had discovered late in life and embraced fully. What the family expected was a simple division of assets. What they received, however, was far more intimate, profoundly personal, and overwhelming. Phil had prepared handwritten letters for each member of his family. No typed documents, no formal statements, just his uneven, shaky handwriting, a testament to his illness, but unmistakably his own. These letters contained far more than financial instructions. They were confessions, apologies, blessings, and guidance meant to shape the lives of the people he loved most. Each envelope held not only a portion of his estate, but also a personal message explaining why he had given it, how he hoped it would be used, and how he wanted his family to carry on his legacy. His net worth, estimated between $10 million and $15 million, was the result of decades of Duck Commander, Duck Dynasty, book deals, licensing, and years of conservative podcasting and public speaking. Yet the power of the letters was not in the money itself. It was in the thought, care, and intention behind each allocation. Miss K inherited full ownership of the family estate, the home they had built together from the days when food often came straight from a swamp. Alan, the former pastor, received Phil's lifelong collection of religious writings. Jason Jeep received proportional shares of Duck Commander, along with the responsibility to safeguard the family tradition. Phyllis received land, accompanied by a handwritten apology for the years she had spent not knowing her father. Willie, the son who had taken Duck Commander to national prominence, inherited the controlling stake in the family business, along with the instruction: protect the faith, protect the legacy. When the last envelope was opened, tears flowed, not for what they gained, but for what they had lost: a life, a story, and a legacy forged in the swamps of Louisiana. To understand the emotional weight of Phil Robertson's will, one must look back to its beginnings. Long before television cameras, merchandising, and book deals, Phil was a poor boy from Louisiana, struggling simply to survive. Born in 1946, he grew up in a home where hunting was not a hobby, but a matter of necessity. Meals often depended on what he could catch in the swamp. Those early hardships shaped him into a resilient, self-reliant, and defiant man, deeply skeptical of anything that pulled him from the land. Yet Phil was more than a swamp boy. He was gifted. His athletic prowess earned him a football scholarship to Louisiana Tech, where he served as starting quarterback in 1966 and 1967. His backup? Terry Bradshaw, the future NFL legend. Many would have seized a professional football career, but Phil made one of the defining decisions of his life. He walked away from football because it interfered with duck season. "I'd rather hunt ducks than have large, violent men stomp me in the dirt," he once said. On the surface, it sounded humorous, but it was a declaration of identity. Freedom was more important to him than fame. In 1972, Phil transformed that freedom into a business. Duck Commander began as a modest operation run from his home, handcrafting duck calls and shipping them one at a time. Miss K, pregnant at 17 and raising their children, supported him through every hardship. For years, they lived with barely enough to survive, relying on faith and whatever the Bayou could provide. The business grew slowly at first, then steadily, and eventually exploded when Willie returned from college with a vision to modernize operations. That growth eventually turned Phil into a multi-millionaire, but the empire he built was grounded in poverty, sacrifice, and family unity, explaining why the letters in his will carried such emotional weight. Each child received more than an inheritance. They received a chapter in a story that spanned generations. Fame arrived in 2012 with the premiere of Duck Dynasty on A&E. What began as a simple reality show about a family running a duck call business quickly became a cultural phenomenon. At its peak, over 11 million viewers tuned in each week to watch Phil speak blunt truths about faith, family, and discipline. What audiences saw was not an act. It was the real Phil Robertson. Fame did not soften him. If anything, it amplified his voice. In 2013, a GQ interview ignited one of the most significant controversies of his career. Phil's candid remarks about homosexuality and race provoked immediate backlash, including temporary suspension from A&E, advertiser withdrawals, and demands for apologies. Yet supporters rallied, merchandise flew off the shelves, and within weeks, he was reinstated. Phil refused to apologize, asserting that his beliefs stemmed directly from Scripture. Over the next decade, he became active in conservative politics, endorsing Ted Cruz in 2016 and later supporting Donald Trump. To some, he embodied religious conviction, to others, intolerance. Phil remained undeterred, believing he was fulfilling God's will, nothing more, nothing less. Long before Phil Robertson became a household name, he was a man on the edge of survival, wrestling with hardship, faith, and identity. Behind the fame, fortune, and controversy was a life defined by struggle, steadfastness, and principle. His final days were not merely about leaving this world. They were about equipping the people he loved most to carry forward the legacy he had crafted from the swamps of Louisiana, a legacy built on faith, family, and unwavering conviction.